As inflation skyrockets and affordable housing becomes harder to find, landlords are demanding that tenants make at least $160,000 a year in Manhattan in order to rent a one-bedroom apartment. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the fact that, hey, housing prices are going up, rents are going up, and it's getting harder and harder for tenants to find affordable housing. But guess what? It's not the fault of landlords. It's not that landlords are getting greedy. No, we suffered hard through the last 2 years of eviction moratoriums and anti-landlord BS. Not only that, but in a place like Manhattan, where it's already super popular and super expensive, hey, landlords have to charge higher rents because their costs are going up due to inflation, and they're trying to, catch up. Okay. So yeah, they want to come out here. They want to play this off like, hey, landlords are bad. Landlords are doing the wrong thing. And hey, keep in mind, this is probably one of the most popular, expensive places in the entire world. So you can't expect rents to be super cheap there already. And then you throw in the fact that we have this outrageous inflation, and guess what? Prices are going to be going through the roof. Now, I didn't think they were ever going to get this high. So the median cost of a one-bedroom apartment is so high that a person would have to make $160,000 a year in order to afford it. That's crazy, okay? And what blows my mind is that people are actually willing to pay those prices. If people are willing to pay those prices, then the landlords have nothing to worry about, and they are charging the correct amount. But you know what? It also exacerbates the issue. The fact that New York is under rent control laws. So I believe that I read that 1/3 of the properties in New York are under rent control. So that means that the market rate rents for all the units, the other 2/3 of properties that are under market rates, they're going to be much, much higher. Okay. And that's what rent control does. It actually drives up the cost of rent in the rest of the units that aren't under rent control. Crazy, huh? But that's the policy they thought that was going to work. That's what they think is going to make housing affordable. Obviously, housing is not going to be affordable by any bureaucratic law or anything that is put into place. But after I read the article, I'm also going to go over one of the comments that was on my YouTube page. And, I like to cover these comments. Sometimes I make a whole video about the comments, but sometimes I just want to respond to, one comment at the end of a regular video. And this one's a pretty good one. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below and let me know, what do you prefer? Do you prefer me doing a full video where I cover, multiple different comments that people make? Or do you prefer me, covering in a regular YouTube video, I cover the news and maybe I cover one comment at the very end? Just let me know what you want to see. I'm going to keep covering the news, obviously, and I don't want to, go dive too deeply into these comments because a lot of them are just from haters, and it's not even worth my time or my attention. Anyway, this article is coming from QZ.com, and it says, Manhattan landlords are rejecting single tenants who don't make over $160,000. And I actually covered this story on my community tab. It got a lot of great input, and that's why I thought, hey, might as well make a full video about it. But let's get into it. New York City's housing market has always been competitive, but renters are facing a particularly tough flat hunt now. The median monthly rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan reached $3,995 in April, a record 38% year-over-year increase and well above pre-pandemic levels, data from the real estate brokerage Douglas Elliman showed. In New York City, it's standard for landlords to apply what is known as the 40X rule to judge someone's ability to pay their rent. In order to qualify as a tenant, a person's annual gross income would be at least 40 times the monthly rent. To rent a one-bedroom at Manhattan's current median price, that means an income of $159,800 or more. In Brooklyn, where the median one-bedroom apartment goes for $2,900 a month, anyone with an income of less than $116,000 annually will also struggle to qualify. And yeah, that's a smart rule. Okay, landlords throughout the country, they have similar rules. Okay, here I don't use the 40x rule. I use the 3x rule. Okay, that means that a tenant has to make or earn at least 3 times the monthly rent, okay, to qualify for my unit. So if my monthly rent, for example, is $1,000, they need to make at least $3,000 a month. So they're doing something very similar here with the 40x rule. It's stretched out over the course of the entire year, but they know that if they don't qualify a tenant based on this rule, then the tenants won't be able to afford the unit, and they're more likely to go through just non-paying tenants, and that's just not worth it in a place like New York, especially. So yeah, nothing wrong with that, but yeah, the median rent in Manhattan is $4,000 a month. That's a lot. That's a lot. I mean, that's more than my house payment. I have a 4,200 square foot, 5-bedroom, 5-bathroom house, but I also don't live in Manhattan. I live in Omaha, Nebraska. So it's a lot cheaper here, a lot less desirable place. And obviously the housing costs are going to be a lot less. So when it comes down to it, though, does this have to do with affordability for the city, or is it just saying, hey, you tenants, you need to go where you can actually afford, okay? If you can't afford Manhattan, they said right here in the article, well, you know what? Brooklyn's a little bit cheaper. And maybe Queens is cheaper than that, okay? Maybe the Bronx or Staten Island, or maybe you need to go over to New Jersey, or maybe you just need to move out of that area altogether. Who knows? But you don't have a right to inexpensive rents, in my opinion. Okay, you don't have a right to have cheap rents just because you want them. That's ridiculous. Okay, you are like everyone else. You can afford what you can afford. You cannot afford what you cannot afford. So you have to live your life based on that knowledge. Meanwhile, the median household income in New York City was $67,046 from 2016 to 2020, according to the latest data available. New York City rents point to a deepening affordable housing crisis in the city as it struggles to bounce back from the pandemic. It also calls into question the feasibility of Mayor Eric Adams' repeated pleas to have employees return to work in person. So yeah, they go into this affordable housing issue, right? And how the median household income in New York City is $67,046. And that is important, right? But like I mentioned before, they have so many units, 1/3 of all the units in New York City are under rent control. So that's how the people who make a lot less money are able to afford to stay there right now. But not only that, but imagine that you have some very high outliers, okay? People who make a ton of money. New York City is known as having the most billionaires per capita of any city in the entire, well, I don't know if the world, but at least the United States, okay? So these billionaires are obviously going to be shooting up the numbers, to skew them very, very high in one way. Also, there's so many extremely high paying jobs in finance and, et cetera, in business that those people, we're talking about, the center of the business world for the United States, we're talking about the most expensive and the most popular place in the entire country. Yes, you're going to have extremely expensive housing there, okay? You don't go down to Beverly Hills. I used this before, but you don't go down to Beverly Hills as a person who makes median household income and expect to just move on into a mansion now, do you? So yeah, the affordable housing issue it shouldn't even be really a concern when it comes to expensive rents in Manhattan. There's a lot less expensive places even within the city where a person could live. But it does show that hey, costs are going up, and they're going up for landlords, they're going up for everybody. So this isn't anything that's an isolated thing. There isn't a lot that can be done about it until we tackle inflation in general, okay? Rising rents impact New Yorkers particularly hard because 2/3 of the population rent, twice the national rate, according to a report by the New York Times. The pain extends to aspiring homeowners too. A recent Zillow survey found that half of U.S. homebuyers are crying during the process. Prices are forecasted to rise even higher in the summer. The warmer months have always been prime time for moving, as it catches new students who relocate to the city, and families with kids tend to use the school holidays to move. In April, bidding wars accounted for more than 1 in 5 new lease signings in Manhattan, according to Douglas Elliman. In those instances, landlords received an average premium of nearly 11% above asking price. It's a sharp contrast to just a year ago, when landlords were regularly handing out 1 month's free rent and other concessions like waived utilities and amenities fees to attract tenants. Yeah, but a year ago, landlords up there were still underneath that eviction moratorium. So, and there were still the effects of the pandemic. A lot of people were still working from home. So they had to offer, different things to entice tenants to move into these properties, because otherwise they would have just gone under. Okay. So now that the markets and, the housing market is back, the rent market is back, things are getting back to normal, they can finally raise the rents, and they're going to raise them up to the level that people are willing to pay. They have to. Simply put, their costs are increasing exponentially with all of the inflation, etc. So, what did they expect? It's a really interesting thing that's going on. And, it doesn't surprise me. Like I said, New York is a very popular place. I've been to New York. I like New York. I like Manhattan. I visited there multiple times, and it's a great place to visit. It's not a place I personally would want to live, but I understand the draw to it because, it's a very different lifestyle than a lot of the different places across the United States. So, now I'm going to get into one of the comments from my comments section. And, I get so many interesting comments from people who don't agree with what I have to say. So let me just get straight into it. And I didn't even write down which video that this person commented from, but this person, her name is Marie G, and she says, "I noticed you are one-sided, and I never heard you talk about tenants. It works both ways. There are some crappy landlords out here, some scandalous landlord that beat landlord, manipulative, deceitful landlords. Let's not forget about those. It works both ways. You have tenants who are bad squatters, who are bad landlords. We're bad. Make it an equal channel, not just one-sided. Not just one-sided." All right, Marie. I'm going to take your comment into consideration and 100% reject it. I am one-sided, okay? And there's a reason I am one-sided. And I'm going to explain it right now, okay? When I created this channel, part of the reason I created it was because even before I had the channel, I read dozens and dozens of articles about new landlord laws, what's happening with landlords, right? And almost all of them paint landlords in a negative image. They almost always put these tenants up there like they are saints, and everything they say is the pure truth. The landlord is an evil, greedy, rich guy off drinking martinis on the beach trying to screw people over. That's what almost every article I read says, that, right? And almost all the channels, every little piece of media you see says that. So when I was like, wait a second, this, there's so much here that's missing. There's parts of the story that are missing, or, you would read an article and then way down and, in paragraph 20, you would hear the truth. And, and I was like, well, this is messed up. This is messed up. There's not a place where landlords can get the news without all of the anti-landlord BS. Okay. And I was like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to create a news channel for landlords, right? By a landlord, by someone who understands the business, by someone who, doesn't believe every little BS tenant story that he hears. And that's what this channel is, okay? This is a channel by a landlord for landlords, where we can discuss news that relates to landlords, real estate investing, and our businesses without having to deal with all of that stuff that you're talking about, that, oh, they're so deceitful and evil. Like, listen, if you want to read that, okay, you've got 100 other places where you can get that content. This is not one of them. So I hope that answers your question. And I hope that, if you don't enjoy this channel, you move along, because I'm not going to change.